Welcome back to another episode of SOTI TV. Today, we're going to be diving into the hidden costs that are killing your mobile operations. As organizations are doubling down on their technology investments, they need the right tools, processes, and know-how to make sure they're maximizing those investments. And for ourselves, in true SOTI TV fashion, we're going to be diving in and explaining some of the key challenges, tools that you're going to be able to leverage to take control of those situations. My name is Mikhail, and I'm joined by my co-host, Wait a second, you're not Mario.
I'm not Mario. You've upgraded, you've got Matt.
Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So in a SOTI TV first, we're actually having a co-host joining us as well. Matt's been here for over 13 years now.
Yeah, actually this year just hit my 16th year, if you can believe that. Yeah.
You're older than some of the technology we'll be talking about.
When I started out, Blackberries were the hottest device in the world. So yeah, things have changed.
Amazing, amazing. And another first for SOTI TV, we're going to be welcoming a very special guest, and they're going to be joining us virtually. So Matt, why don't you introduce our guest for today?
I would be happy to. Mikhail, it's my pleasure to actually invite one of our top platinum partners here today, Manhattan Associates. Manhattan has been a longtime partner of SOTI with decades of experience kind of architecting and deploying mission critical mobility projects. Really because their specialty is really helping their customers and our shared customers automate their supply chain. So whether that's in the warehouse, whether that's with transportation, management systems, they are experts in this area. So I couldn't think of a better guest to have here today on SOTI TV.
I'm excited to dive into it.
It's my pleasure to welcome Matt Dermody from Manhattan Associates.
Welcome, Matt.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction, Matt Reeder. Just to elaborate a bit, my role is Director of Engineering for the Enterprise Mobility Group at Manhattan Associates. Matt did a great job introducing our core capabilities around supply chain software. But in my role, I focus a lot on the mobile side of our deployments, whether that's the mobile applications that run on the devices that interface with the back-end software that is provided by Manhattan Associates to our end customers, as well as the device management piece. And that's where our partnership with SOTI really came together, is our need to properly manage and deploy the devices that are ultimately running our software. So thanks again for having me. Looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Love that, love that. Well, for another SOTI TV first, we got Matt and Matt. So they say two Matts are better than one.
I agree with that. But not always. Not always.
Well, listen, to keep it a little bit more straightforward for our viewers. So Matt, since you're our guest, we're going to keep you as Matt, and you're going to be SOTI Matt for today's episode.
All right. Okay, deal.
Perfect.
Amazing, amazing. So let's get into it. Let's do the rundown of what we're going to be looking at today's episode. So first and foremost, we're going to dive into ensuring that organizations can select the right type of hardware for their operations. And as they're selecting that hardware, we're going to be focusing in on the right management software to really maximize the ROI of those mobility investments. And as you choose the right software, you want to make sure that you have the right diagnostic tool set to diagnose those devices and reduce that potential downtime. And as with always, we want to dive into all the security risks that can come out from having a continued enhancement in your mobile deployments. And there's a lot of ways that we can take a look at these security practices, and I'm very excited to pick your brain on that, Matt. And as with always, to maximize any of your investment in both technology, hardware, and software, you have to have the right training to take advantage of it. So we're going to dive into the importance of training. And we're going to leave you with some best practices of what you can do today and what you can start doing to plan for your future mobility deployments to make sure you're maximizing the ROI on those particular investments. Now, before we dive into the episode, we have a cool little segment that we like to do to kind of get everybody comfortable and, dive into some of these topics. We call it Rapid Fire Round. So this works really easily. It's a this or that game. So I'm going to ask you a question. Matt, we'll have you go first. SOTI, Matt, we'll get you to go second, and I'll wrap it up. So this or that, no explanation needed. So let's kick it off. You ready, Matt?
Ready.
All right.
I'm ready too.
You're ready. All right. I know you're always ready. Laptop or desktop?
Laptop.
Desktop.
All right.
Gaming.
I'm going laptop. Got to bring it around with me.
Sure.
VR headset or AR glasses?
Ooh, AR glasses.
All right.
I like Matt, AR glasses.
I think we're all going with AR on this one.
VR gives me motion sickness.
Self-driving or drive yourself?
Drive myself.
Drive myself.
Drive myself.
I don't trust those robots.
Look at that. We're already in sync.
Yeah.
Cloud or on-prem?
Cloud for sure.
That's an easy one. Cloud for sure.
Nah, I'm going cloud too.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, I think this will be an interesting one for you. Manage service or manage it yourself?
Oh, wow. As a managed service provider, I think I have to say managed service.
Yes, a lot of customers get into it and then get a little overwhelmed. Managed services all the way.
No, I love it. Managed service for me as well. There's so much technology that organizations need to manage. I think it's easier to offset it.
100%.
All right. So hope you like that game. I like to see how we're all in sync already. So listen, let's jump into the meat of it. So we've talked about the hidden costs that are killing your mobile operations. And we're seeing the total cost of ownership for devices rise. We're seeing new form factors enter the organizations. And things from repairs to different areas causing device downtime. Matt, I would love to know your take on how are you seeing this play out for some of these organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've had, and I maybe to back up a bit and set the background. My focus is primarily on warehouse management related devices, as well as retail stores. So I have that lens that I'm bringing to this conversation. But there has typically been some level of dedicated or purpose-built hardware in this space. A lot of these devices might have a keyboard, or they might have some intrinsic properties like being freezer rated or rugged or durable for the environment. But the kind of key point is that they are purpose-built and dedicated. Over time, we've seen kind of more consumerization trends in that space. I think driven a lot by the operating system. We went through a major transition in our space to Android over the past decade or so. And with that has come an evolution in expectations from an end user experience standpoint. So we see things like keyboards disappearing and maybe more tablet type form factors emerging. And I think that's a interesting trend, but what it also has done is kind of confuse the market a little bit. When you have a rugged or durable enterprise class device that looks like a tablet that is consumer grade, how do you differentiate that? So the market has gotten a little bit confused, and my company and team are regularly walking our end customers through those buying journeys to help them understand and kind of cut through the noise. Did you have any kind of further questions on that, Mikhail?
Yeah, so when we did a little bit of our own research, so one of the things that we saw is some of the top leading causes of device downtime, and we're seeing things like cellular and Wi-Fi from a connectivity perspective. We're seeing mid-shift battery failures, and then application stability is kind of the top three things that we're seeing coming up. Would you agree with that? Is that similar to what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those things are big reasons we maybe re-emphasize the need to go rugged. And this term rugged, I almost want to redefine, because people think it just means durable or that it can survive a drop or it's waterproof. I really think of it more as mission critical or dedicated devices that come with a established track record. They come with a trusted brand behind them, an established roadmap, access to security updates long term, visibility to that roadmap, knowing how many versions of an operating system are going to be available for that device. You've got this kind of whole ecosystem of support that surrounds a true enterprise class device that you just don't get when it comes to consumer. And extending beyond that, you have things like radio troubleshooting tools, right? The wireless radio is a key source, or the wireless connectivity, I should say, whether that's cellular or Wi-Fi, is a key source of productivity issues if it's not optimized correctly. And the right manufacturers will provide you with the proper tools for both configuring and managing those wireless radios so that they're optimized for your environment and for the applications that you need to use. And they also will provide you tools to allow you to log and analyze and troubleshoot those things. And you're just not going to get those capabilities from, say, like a Apple
Yeah.
iPad, right? It just either works or it doesn't, but you don't really have much you can do in terms of troubleshooting why it's not working.
And I think that's one of the key points, right? Like, as you know, and let's dive into the customer journey, right? Like, we've talked about kicking the process off is selecting the right type of hardware, right? And Matt, you alluded to consumer versus rugged devices. So I think for our viewers, let's kind of explore that a little bit deeper and say, from a consumer perspective, and we can see some of these devices up on the screen on here. And you've mentioned, your typical form factors. You got your tablets, you got your phones. Maybe there's a phablet in between, but there's not that wide range of form factors on the consumer side, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. You've got basically two primary form factors you've already called out, which is more the PDA or handheld or phone type form factor, and then a tablet are mostly what we see on the consumer space. And there might be some accessories that bleed in, like a smartwatch, or maybe we're seeing some consumer adoption of some glasses that are emerging, like maybe the Meta Ray-Bans is an example of an emerging consumer form factor. But for the most part, what you have shown here, maybe it's a tablet or a phone style device, which is great from a multi-purpose standpoint, but they're good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing. And a lot of our enterprise customers need devices that are really great or specialized at one thing, or are in a particular area, right? So a phone is a very universal form factor, but it's going to fall short when it comes to things like maybe scanning is kind of a core reason. Can you scan with a camera? Kinda.
Maybe.
Good enough? Maybe.
Well, what takes us into our next topic, right? Like, you talked about rugged devices. So when we take a look at the different types of rugged or mission critical devices you pointed out, we get into, all these different things that don't typically exist in the consumer market, right? You might be talking about intrinsically safe devices, different IP ratings. So Matt, I'd love for you to kind of help our viewers really understand, like, what makes a rugged device rugged.
Well, and really, what's the difference between semi-rugged, rugged, ultra rugged, intrinsically safe? Like, there's all these acronyms and names and titles, and it's like,
it's funny you say that, because I was just at an event in Dallas last week with one of our OEM partners, and I was really picking their brain is what's rugged versus fully rugged, and then we get these ultra rugged military devices. So yeah, Matt, debunk it for us. What is?
Tell us the truth.
Sure. Yeah, and I think rugged is a little bit of a, I don't know if it's a misnomer, but it doesn't tell you the full story anymore. And I kind of alluded to this already, but maybe to expand upon it, I think the term should really be more like purpose built. Because rugged makes you think in terms of maybe some physical specs of the device. It's waterproof rating, its drop rating, et cetera. Is this a durable device that can take a beating? That's what the term rugged really kind of implies. But that's just, again, one piece of the overall picture. What we really tend to care about are these other things that make a purpose-built device for enterprise work, basically optimized for that environment. And some maybe examples that extend beyond the durability would be things like, does it have a hot swappable battery? Right? My phone doesn't have a hot swappable battery. When it dies, I've got to plug it into the wall. Now imagine, that's okay if I'm sitting at an airport waiting for my phone to charge, or I've got a battery pack or something to that effect. But if this is a point of sale register for your business, or it's a device that you need to ship product out the door. You can't have end users sitting in the corner waiting for their devices to charge in order to be able to resume work. So something as simple as a replaceable battery is going to be something that keeps your operations running smoothly. And that replaceable battery also extends the overall life cycle of the device. So you have hot swap in the moment to keep the device running, but also think about the fact that you're not dealing with an embedded battery that eventually is going to reduce its charge cycles and charge capacity, and eventually the device would have to be replaced completely if you didn't have that replaceable battery. So that's just a simple example of that may not be obvious to people unless you've experienced it. But if you go true consumer, if you tried to run your business on iPads or on a maybe a Samsung device that doesn't have a replaceable battery, that's going to quickly become a problem for your operations, because you're going to be beholden to those batteries, and you probably will have shorter life cycles as a result. I mean, other kind of quick examples I'll bring up is first-party accessories. You're not Frankensteining a bunch of different third-party things together in order to achieve durability, in order to achieve maybe a replaceable battery. And then I also really like and appreciate the visibility to the operating system versions, the security patching, the roadmaps that the true enterprise class manufacturers are going to provide their end customers. There's a ton of transparency around that, so that you can understand, where am I buying this device relative to its life cycle? Am I about to buy a device that only has a couple years left? Well, the manufacturers typically are pretty transparent about that, but you won't see that level of transparency necessarily, or commitment to availability from the consumer grade side, meaning a Zebra or a Honeywell may say, hey, this device we just launched, we're going to sell for the next 5 years. After those 5 years, you're guaranteed an additional 5 years of support and access to maybe software updates or security patches. You're just not going to see that same level of commitment and transparency from the consumer side. And that is where I see this story as being so much more than just the term rugged as an adjective. It's a much bigger story than just the hardware specs of the device.
So, Matt, one of the interesting discussions that we're having these days is kind of with a lot of OEMs embedding AI on the device side and driving these AI chipsets. One of the things we keep seeing as a discussion point is all this AI chipset driving hardware selection? Is it on top of minds for organizations to go through an earlier refresh cycle to take advantage of these things, right? And I mean, to give our viewers a bit of an example, right? We're seeing things like Google Gemini, Apple Intelligence, we're seeing Galaxy AI come from the Samsung side, and then Copilot and Copilot Plus, just to name a few. There's a lot more out there, but these are the ones we're seeing prevalent in the industry today. So, Matt, the question to you is, what are you seeing in the refresh cycles? Are you seeing this driving hardware upgrades?
I currently do not see it actually having much impact on our refresh cycles for hardware. There's a couple of factors in play here. Our industry tends to maybe lag a little bit, or are maybe cautiously optimistic about these sorts of trends. And maybe to just give you an example of that, the iPhone hit the consumer market in 2007, and then the Android operating system and the first Android devices kind of hit shortly thereafter. But we really didn't see true enterprise adoption of Android, at least in the warehouse and retail store space, for these dedicated devices until 2015 or 2016. So there was a huge lag between when the consumer market maybe got into a frenzy about something, and when the enterprise market finally responded to that and started to adopt those things. There are definitely trends in the consumer market that inform what we should be doing in the enterprise. But right now, without there being maybe a lot of great software-based use cases that, or problems that are being solved by having AI natively on device, I just don't see it yet driving the upgrade or refresh cycle in the next 18 months. It's not to say it won't happen. It's just I think we need the software to catch up a bit, and the actual problems that we're solving
I think we're seeing the
be a
same
little more
thing.
clear.
Yeah, like, I think we're trying to really understand what those use cases are, right? I think it's very much at the exploratory stage. And you said, I think there's a lot that it can do, but to prove out those enterprise use case and prove out the ROI is going to be key to the driving that.
Having AI just to have AI isn't going to push anything forward. It's all around the use case. So it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, and well, one
Yeah.
of the other things I wanted to dive into, and Matt, I know you guys kind of look at the whole ecosystem, but Windows versus Android, right? We see some top tier OEMs obviously bring their device to market in multiple flavors. You can choose Windows, you can choose Android. What are you seeing in your space? What's dominating and what's driving that selection?
Yeah, great question. I'll split it up between our primary verticals or areas of focus. So in the warehouse, Android is just dominating these days. We don't have much left happening on Windows unless maybe we're talking on a fixed station, so somebody who is sitting in front of a computer desktop experience as their preference. Even though Android can maybe deliver some version of a desktop experience in some cases, people generally still prefer Windows in that, but there are some emerging trends. We are seeing some Android thin clients starting to come out, so some headless solutions that would utilize keyboard, mouse, monitor all together, but be powered by a small little Android box. So I think pretty soon we might see even Android take over Windows in that space, because there's kind of a reduction in technical debt for your IT teams. If everything's running the same operating system and is on the same platform, it's easier to manage, it's easier to deploy, it's more predictable. The retail storefront is a little bit more, or say, less pinned down. We have oftentimes a mixture of operating systems in the store. You'll have a traditional fixed station point of sale register that often is running Windows. Now, as our end customers look to refresh that hardware to accommodate our next generation point of sale software that we offer, a lot of them are looking at Android. Android does seem to be taking a much bigger foothold in the retail space these days, because if you look at it, it's really the only platform that allows you to have the full spectrum of devices covered. So if you wanted a fixed register and you wanted a tablet and you wanted a mobile device, for depending on what the
That's a good
retail
point.
associate needs to do, Android is really the only ecosystem that can deliver all three of
That's a
those
really good point.
platforms
Really
at the
good point.
same time.
Yeah, do kind of choice of your various form factors and things like that, which takes us perfectly into our next section, right? You got the devices, you've selected the right hardware for your organizations, but you got to have the right management software, right? And I think right in our wheelhouse, in the EMM space, UEM, EMM space, there's over 200 plus solutions out there, right? Everything from low cost alternatives to really advanced solution set to things we're focusing on right now around mobile workforce management, which even goes outside the scope of EMM, UEM, MDM. When organizations are looking to select the right solution for their organizations, what are some of the key considerations they need to be looking at from your point of view, Matt?
Yeah, fantastic. We've got maybe you're looking at what operating systems you have to manage, and what applications need to be installed on those devices, and where those applications are being pulled from, and how frequently they need to be updated, and maybe what other level of device settings do you need to be able to manage, are all things that you need to evaluate when it comes to managing these devices. And my typical focus is mostly around the Android side of things, mostly because of the earlier points that I've called out. It's just the operating system that just makes the most sense in our space. So that's where a lot of my focus and attention is. And there are a couple other things relative to managing Android that I tend to look for. I really need remote control when it comes to managing and deploying these devices. I really also need the ability to install applications directly onto the device. Kind of an interesting thing. You mentioned the 200 different
Yeah.
players out there, right? So Google has tried to make this easier for the buyer by defining what they call Android Enterprise Recommended,
Yep.
or sometimes abbreviated AER, and it's this published list of specs and capabilities that you must deliver upon and be audited against and prove
Year
that you
over
can
year,
do
we go through it every
these
year.
Every
things.
year it's fun.
Exactly. And the intention I think was good from Google, but the end result, or at least how I interpret it, and this might be a little controversial, but I think of it as the lowest common denominator set of capabilities that you need to do to say that you support Android. And it can trick the buyer into thinking, hey, if it's on this list, it's got to be good enough. And my opinion is just not the case. It's the bare minimum set of things that you need to deliver to say that you support Android. And my end customers deserve and need better than that or more than that when it comes to the dedicated
Yeah.
device space. So there are a few players in the space that have gone above the call of duty, beyond what Google and Android have defined as the base set of recommendations. And SOTI is one of them. SOTI is a leader in the pack when it comes to kind of delivering what Google says you need to be able to do from a functionality standpoint, but then extending beyond that and providing extra layers like scripting and automation and firmware update management and direct app installation. The list goes on, and we can probably go into more detail on some of those things. But that is what I look for when I evaluate an MDM or EMM provider is who's going above the call of duty, right?
Yeah.
Who's doing beyond just what is defined as the baseline.
And Matt, one of the things I want to do is I want to bring up our device lifecycle chart, because I think just for our viewers out there, right? When we look at good management software, from the time we're bringing these devices into the organization, configuring, provisioning them, maintaining them throughout their life cycle, tracking where all your assets are, all the way down to decommissioning, retiring, or upcycling, whichever path your organization chooses to take. I think a couple of the key points that you touched on really touches on having the key functionality at all parts of the device lifecycle management, not just one or the other, to truly maximize these investments. And as we look at the life cycle, there's another thing that I wanted to bring up is kind of the evolution of EMM, right? We've talked about, you said MDM, UEM, EMM. We're getting into autonomous endpoint management now. And if this is all new to you, we did cover this in depth in our episode 2 of SOTI TV. We had a very special guest kind of diving into this and explaining what these different areas are. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, go look at that episode, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of this. But Matt, to you, like, how have you seen this evolution, right? Like going from the early MDM days to all the crazy automation we're facing today. Kind of what's your take on
Through all the acronyms.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try not to belabor the acronyms, but kind of at the high level, the original philosophy used to be set it and forget it, or you'd hear another term called golden images,
Yeah.
which was a philosophy around let me build and architect a configuration image, and we'll run that on our devices for the next 5 to 7 years, and if it's not broke, let's not fix it. And over the years, we've had to evolve that and then pick that apart. And the device image is this living, breathing thing now, and it's constantly evolving. We have a lot more security attack risks these days, so we need to keep things patched. When we patch the operating system, we might break something else, and we might need to maybe adjust some configuration. So it's this living, breathing thing that we're touching constantly. Every one of our customer environments that we provide managed services to from a mobility standpoint, there is no set it, forget it for them. We are every year are touching their devices well, not actually touching them because we're using remote device management to take care of these problems, but we're upgrading their firmware. We're managing mobile app upgrades. We're plugging holes or vulnerabilities that might have emerged. It's a constant care and feeding that you have to do, and the providers like SOTI have evolved their products over time to account for those trends, and you've seen changing it naming convention over time. Honestly, I've kind of ignored it. I've always just called it MDM in my mind, but whatever the marketing team wants to call it these days is fine with me, I guess.
No, it's really interesting, right? Like, because when we look at all this, and you touched on this, it's having the right tools, it's doing things over the air, which is perfectly kind of segue into our next section. And SOTI, Matt, you know, me and you have been at SOTI for over 13 years. Remote control has been synonymous from day one when I joined the organization. But when we start looking at the true diagnostic tool set for organizations to avoid that downtime with things like remote control, I'd love to get your thoughts on what are some of those key diagnostic tool sets and potentially even integration with third-party tools.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about on the slide the lifecycle management, that maintain and that support and that troubleshoot is the majority of the project. You know, kind of day one, you got to roll the devices out and deploy them. And then near the end of lifecycle management, you have to retire them. Well, what about those 3 or 4 or 5 years in the middle that you need to maintain, update, support, and troubleshoot? You have to have a robust remote help desk solution that I think even Matt hit on with remote control. Because the use case is that these users are non-technical. If they're a retail store worker, they're just trying to do their job. If they're in the warehouse or distribution center, they're focused on accomplishing their tasks. They're not troubleshooting technology. So you need a robust remote control and technology solution to be able to jump into these devices over the air in real time and fix it. You need access to the underlying operating system like ADB logs and to be able to actually do everything on that device from usually IT is centrally located. And I'm sure Matt has seen this before with IT isn't near the device at all.
And those 100 questions that we always get when we call into support. What are you running? What are you doing?
Everyone's been there. IT goes, I don't know, reboot the device. And you're like, that didn't solve the problem at all. I need to be able to, you know, take a snapshot of the device. I need to be able to clone the device. I need to be able to grab all this data and fix it so I don't have to ship the device back and that worker isn't working anymore. So it makes it quick and it's easy with that kind of robust tools. But Matt, like you kind of hit on the remote control part, but I'm sure you have mountains of use cases where you need to fix something, but you're not there. You're not in front of the device.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I like that point about in the life cycle, there's the years in between, and you know the MDM or the tool we're using has to be good at the build activities. This is where we architect the configuration image that we're assigning to the devices and keeping that maintained. But it also needs to help you out or help your IT team troubleshoot and identify issues so that you know how to maybe change something that's in the image that needs to be adjusted. And the tools that SOTI provides in terms of remote control that's natively integrated into the console, I think that's a key point I want to make here. There are other players that maybe claim that they offer remote control, and then you read the fine print and you find out it's through a third-party license and it's an additional cost and it's not natively integrated. So it's super powerful that SOTI provides and has kind of been historically known for offering a remote control capability, because what that enables me to do as I'm supporting my end customers is I don't need to proxy through an end user, and or I can be their eyes and ears, you know, as if I'm holding their device in my hands. I can see the error that they're seeing on the screen. There's nothing lost in translation. I can enable and pull logs. So through remote control, we also have file system access, so we can pull the logs that we need to pull, make our analysis, adjust the configuration image that we're deploying, and we're usually at resolution, you know, within the hour. It's tremendous how much that reduces our kind of time to resolution. Having that tool at our disposal, being able to remotely view something, interact with the device, extract either a configuration file or a log file, perform an analysis, make a decision, and fix the problem. I mean, I've been doing that for customers while we've been on this call. Honestly, it makes my life
Multitasking.
so easier.
You have another
So easy.
monitor going, and you're remote controlling
do.
a device right
I
now.
do. Yeah, I do.
Well, so kind of segueing into that integration part, right? Like a lot of our customers today, SOTI has built-in ability to track tickets. So all these calls coming in, all these support initiatives, and then when you resolve it, you want to log it somewhere. SOTI has built-in a ticketing solution, but there's also third-party ticketing solutions that you need to integrate into, and SOTI's proud to announce that we're actually integrating with ServiceNow in our 2026 release. But there's a lot actually here on the screen that you can see. There's actually a lot of third-party tools where that's the central ticketing solution that the customers want to log all of their support calls in. I don't know if you have experience with any of these so far, Matt, but hopefully some of these ring a bell.
Yeah, definitely some familiar logos on the slide there. We definitely encounter ServiceNow probably the most, and kind of maybe to expand upon your point there, Matt, and for the viewer, is that SOTI has a tool built into Excite for kind of case management, and it has some unique differentiating hooks, such as the ability to pull up this remote control view we've referred to enable your help desk technicians to interact with or do these tasks like collecting logs from the devices. And there's a nice separation or sandboxing between that and the Mobi control console, where your maybe device admins would be working and they could be doing more build activities and designing device images, which could be separate from your support desk or help desk technician. So there's some unique capabilities that SOTI offers, but we definitely ran into some frequent challenges where most of our end customers already have some sort of help desk software that they want to continue to leverage. So rather than displacing that software, we're going to meet them where they are with this integration that you're referring to, and kind of deliver the best of both worlds. Give them some of these hooks into the differentiating features that SOTI provides to help them troubleshoot more effectively without requiring them to replace probably a deeply entrenched help desk software like ServiceNow.
Yeah, and I mean, when we look at the ITSM process in general, right, like Matt, exactly to your point, they love the advanced diagnostics and analytical tools so that we provide, but they need that overall corporate visibility to actually understand how many of these tickets are mobile versus hardware replacements and things like that. And I think with this level of integration, we really do drive a streamlined approach to how organizations are going to leverage these tools across the ITSM process. And, when we look at all this and when we look at the whole gamut of devices, software, the diagnostic tools, everything you're using, like SOTI, Matt, I got to say, like, security is always top of mind, right? And I think there's a big cost associated with ignoring that and potentially allowing some of those security risks. And Matt, I know you have a very interesting take on this. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, definitely. The security topic is multifaceted because maybe during the buying cycle, there'll typically be an IT security team who's interested in whether the devices are going to have access to security patches and all of these various maybe concerns that they bring to the table. But it's always an interesting thing for me because they get their peace of mind that, yes, these manufacturers are committed to providing security updates. And it's great that we have enterprise manufacturers that are doing this for us. It's a lot of work and a big undertaking that companies like Zebra and Honeywell offer as part of their device portfolios is the access to these ongoing security patches. But that's just the IT side of this, the security side of this. The operational side of it is deploying and managing these updates actually is a big operational impact, because while a device is being updated, it typically can't be in use. You might need to pull it aside or rotate it out of production. The updates themselves take a lot of bandwidth on your network. SOTI has some tools that can help with that, such as Extreme Hub. But in general, there are things that we talk a lot about during the sales cycle. But then in production, people are less likely to take these updates as you might realize. And what I actually find to be the biggest vulnerability that we contend with, more so than this scary outside third-party hacker who might hack
Cyber
your
hackers, the
mobile
data
devices.
breaches, everyone's
Right.
creeping around the corner
Hold
trying to get
on,
on your
North
laptop.
Korean hackers aren't the #1 priority right now?
It turns out the biggest instability cause that we deal with and have for many years, even before Android was prevalent, is the end users themselves. So these people have kind of unfettered access to the device and have a lot of time on their hands, and every day they use this mobile computer to do their job. And they get creative. And I'm not saying every end user is malicious or every end user is, I have a term I want to almost call them, because you've heard of like white hat hackers and gray hat hackers. These are your hard hat hackers, right? So these are the people that are just looking to get to YouTube or Spotify so they can listen to music while they do their job. Like, it may not seem particularly malicious at first, but it can cause productivity issues. It can cause unnecessary traffic on your network. And I'm constantly in a position of helping my end customers whose devices that I manage plug these leaky holes that the end users creatively come up with. It's funny you mentioned AI earlier, because actually some of these new AI tools are ways that users are getting to these other
voice activated
areas. Yeah, they're talking to Copilot, or they're talking to Gemini and say, open the YouTube app, right? And then YouTube's open. So we find new vulnerabilities all the time through these creative end users, and SOTI really has helped us tremendously in diagnosing these things. So maybe through remote control, I can observe a device and see how a user is doing something, and then start to game plan and maybe figure out how I'm going to plug that, right? Oh, I see they're launching Copilot and then talking to it and then asking it to do this. Okay, I need to figure out how to restrict that behavior using the tools at my disposal. And our manufacturers and you guys have been super helpful in plugging these things. A lot of times we might not have a setting yet that we can use to plug that, but through collaborating with everyone involved, we're able to shut that stuff down. It's also big. Yeah, go ahead, please.
My favorite use case is a customer sent us a video of an employee opening up on the mobile device the help file, clicking on the link to then launch another web browser to get out of it. They really wanted to get to YouTube.
And I mean, listen, it's interesting because I definitely agree with the end user security piece. And this is where I think the market's really shifted from just the MDM capabilities, like get my device ready to go, maybe remote into it, fix it 100%. But when we start talking about the context of mobile workforce management, you want to know what's going on that device. I want to know when they open YouTube. I want to know what app they're using hour by hour. More importantly, I want to have that operational visibility to be informed about that automatically through things like the watch list functionality as an example, right? Like, I always laugh about like bias feedback. You're going to walk up to an employee. It's like, how productive were you today? Well, I spent 2 hours on YouTube between 3 to 5, right? Like, no one's that honest.
Well, during NFL playoffs, you see NFL cutouts and video streaming go up on company networks because people are watching it on their devices.
No, I agree. It's and the end user piece is definitely big to it, right? And I like how you talked about that. There are ways to mitigate that, but you got to have the right tool set to be able to gain visibility, to take actionable insights, I would say, against particular those things. And I gotta say, like, one of the key things, and sorry, Matt, I want to dive into this with you as well, is, we've talked about end user enablement. We've talked about needing the right knowledge to really implement and manage these systems. But what I really want to get into is also the importance of training. Right? When we talk about educating the end user about what the right utilization of that device is, when we talk about training the IT staff, the support staff that's out in the field, I think training is such a big part of the equation to really bring everything together and maximize those investments.
So there's a couple different parts of training. So for the end user, I kind of agree with Matt. in the sense that don't give them all that access. Don't enable them to say, you can do whatever you want. Actually giving them a locked down experience where there's maybe only one or two options, I think is going to solve 80 to 90% of the challenges with the users, that store worker, that warehouse worker, that truck driver that needs to use a mobile device. Obviously, the IT department, the technicians and the engineers, they need to be trained on how to use such a powerful tool like SOTI, because you can do anything. You can kind of do everything on those devices. So what you turn on, how you use it, it is pretty in depth, because I think Matt brought it up earlier on, well, if it's a Windows device, if it's an Android device, if it's an Apple device, those are completely different ecosystems. There might be some synergy, but that network administrator, our customers that deploy SOTI, either need to be experts in everything, or they need to be trained very, very well on all these security, deployment, updating, provisioning, locating lost or stolen devices. But Matt, kind of what's your sense on the training, whether it's the end user or even the IT staff, to be honest?
Sure. Yeah, I've got, I guess, multiple perspectives on this because I'm a managed service provider for the device management software and the configuration of the devices. So I have a group of end users for myself, which are the IT admins of the device management software. And when I train those folks, what I focus on is more the day-to-day operation side of device management. So this is the 3 to 5 years in the middle that Matt mentioned earlier. How do they do the day-to-day functionality of staging or enrolling a device, turning on logs, accessing through remote control, etc. I rarely am teaching people how to build or architect configuration images for the devices because it changes too frequently, and yet they may not need to do it but once or twice a year, and it's a function that they just won't do frequently enough compared with how frequent my team is in the weeds updating things for our end customers. It's easier for us to just manage that side of things and then train our customers' IT teams on the kind of day-to-day operations through Mobi Control. So that's the IT management of the MDM lens for Mobi Control. But then also, since I work for Manhattan Associates, the warehouse management provider, we care about the end users themselves using the mobile devices and the technology, and are certainly conscious of how we can make the training and onboarding process easier and smoother for those people. In our world, there is a ton of turnover in retail stores or in warehouses. Some of these employees might only be there for a couple days or a week, right?
Well,
so
look at seasonal workers, right, Matt? Like honestly, like you talk about thousands of employees coming in for, garden season, Christmas season. You're seeing tens of thousands of people in certain organizations joining in for a few months, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do we ramp those people up quickly? How do we use the technology to facilitate that? I agree with Matt that we have to give them some guardrails to kind of keep them, on the tracks and not distracted by different things, give them access to the mobile apps that they need access to, but also to help maybe enable them somewhat. So an example of this is, Manhattan has recently built in an AI-enabled kind of chat bot into our mobile application itself, where if the user gets stuck in a certain process, they can ask it questions. Hey, what am I supposed to be doing here? What is the right process that I should follow? And our end customers, the companies, are able to supply their own documentation for this. So the model can reference, the specific documentation for operating procedures so that they can get a tailored answer provided to the end user. So we definitely see some emerging trends when it comes to enabling the end user to do a little bit more self-guided training and onboarding. That they're certainly helping to optimize that experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, from a 10,000 foot view, you talked about end users being a big security vulnerability. Do you believe the proper training for the end user mitigates some of that risk?
Potentially. I think it's about keeping users on task and completing their job. But I don't want it to be ultimately, if the user experience is friendly and we've gamified things and the work is engaging, maybe they won't be distracted by trying to get onto YouTube or Spotify. But there's a large pool of users out there. I can't say it will solve kind of every scenario, but through gamifying the mobile app experience, maybe self-enabling some of the access to knowledge or training materials, and then through IT-based solutions like the lockdown feature from SOTI and restricting application access, I think we can keep everybody on the rails as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, as we kind of bring this all together, Matt, I want to throw this over to you. What are the best practices that our customers really need to be aware of, from selecting the right devices, having the right software, having the right diagnostic tools, having the right training? What do you want to tell them are the best practices to always keep top of mind?
Wow, yeah. In summary, right, you have my view of the world is first from the software perspective. So once you've identified what software you're running, whether that's in your warehouse or in your fleet of trucks or your retail store, that will help inform kind of what hardware and operating systems you can support. And then kind of from there, you look into the device management that can properly manage those things. And then ultimately, I would certainly recommend a partner that can help you in this buying journey, because a lot of the times this might be a buying cycle that only happens based on the life cycle of these devices once every 5-7 years, right? So there might be somebody who's only done this once or twice in their career, and they need some help going through that journey, cutting through the noise, figuring out what Android Enterprise recommended means, or what all these different buzzwords and manufacturers are. My team and my company, and there's some other great providers in the space that really can help customers navigate this journey, right? It's hard for me to give you all the best practices right now and right here on this call, but I'd say the big takeaway is to get the right partner to help you along this journey. These are expensive purchases. They're a big time decision. This is a mission critical asset. If these devices are not running, your operations are down. So it's not something that you
how
can be
often, how
taken
many
too
times
easily.
have you had to do your Zebra lifeguard updates? Because you have such a big list of customers, you're probably doing it all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm happy to have Moby Control in my tool belt to help me with that. But we are upgrading firmware on devices all year, every year. It's a never-ending job for us. We're actively rolling out Android 14 right now across most of our customer portfolio. I'd like to say, we probably are pretty bleeding edge when it comes to operating system adoption, and we make sure our mobile applications are updated well in advance. I think this is a key part of being plugged in with the manufacturers and having these relationships, is we know when Zebra is going to start cutting in a certain version of an operating system at production, but before it hits, maybe the public knowledge. So we know, okay, by this time, by this day, our mobile applications need to be compatible with that operating system. And then that's at least what our software team is doing. My team, from a device managed service standpoint, and we're making sure that our configuration images are prepared for that and ready for that, and trying to understand what are we going to need to tweak in our device images for end customers when an Android 14 device hits their doorstep. Because this happens. These devices, they go in for repair. They're in a rugged environment. They get broken. They get run over by a forklift. They get sent in. They come back. They'll be running a new operating system. And if you're not prepared for that, it's going to catch a lot of people flat-footed. And I see online a lot of people asking questions on how do I downgrade my device to the older operating system. And that just tells me that, whoever that was and whoever their support provider is, just wasn't prepared for that moment. And I never want to be in that position where I'm forcing my end customers to have to
Well,
downgrade and
I gotta
expose
say,
themselves to.
it makes a great pitch for managed services, right? When my technology moves very quickly, you need the right partner there with you that knows it in and out. And Matt, you definitely live this every day in and day out. And for some of our viewers out there, right, we've talked about that modern management tool stack. And for anyone that didn't get a chance to catch it yet, we did go deep into what that modern management stack looks like and the blueprint for modern management with Carl. So if you haven't had a chance, check out SOTI TV episode 1. We'll give you a lot of great information and things to watch for as you're picking the right solution provider for you as well. And Matt, like throwing it over to you a little bit, right? This is why I love the managed services play, because a lot of organizations don't have the time or the resources to know about all the latest devices, to test every patch, to test every operating system upgrade, especially when you get into a multitude of different operating systems. So, sometimes when you can't do it yourself, you got to have the right partner.
That's why SOTI Pulse, like customers are asking questions every day, all day. How do I do this? What do I do here? Because they don't know. They need a managed services partner for help.
And I gotta say, Matt, another big shout out to you. You're our top contributor on the SOTI Pulse page. Actually, you're answering all the questions that are coming up there.
You're famous.
I'm up there. I think there's a few of us that regularly contribute. I don't know if I'm number one. I think I might be number one in North America. I'll take that crown.
No global domination yet.
Yeah. but yeah, I keep my finger on the pulse if that's I guess the intention of the naming convention there. It's super helpful. I mean, I'm simultaneously kind of advertising Manhattan's capabilities through my answers. I'm open sourcing knowledge to kind of give you a preview of kind of what working with me could provide you access to. You wouldn't even have to think about these problems or questions if you just would leverage my team's knowledge and skill set for this stuff. So it's exposing kind of our own knowledge to the world, but also it's helping me understand what are the common problems that people are facing and what issues are bubbling up. Hey, is this issue I'm experiencing at 5 of my customers about to be a big widespread issue across 250 of them? I need to be prepared for the widespread problems as they pop up, and the SOTI Pulse community has been very helpful for helping provide visibility to those sorts of things.
I love that. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone does want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, I guess you could find me on SOTI Pulse while we're on that topic. That's SOTI's community discussion forum. You can find me online. I'm sure it won't be too hard from there. Or LinkedIn is great as well. And from LinkedIn, I could get you connected with my email address and so forth. So either one of those platforms, it would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you so much to our viewers for tuning in today. I hope you found everything you've heard about useful. If you want to go ahead and stay in the know about everything we're chatting about, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button. Thank you for joining today, and we'll see you next time.